in the blood-stained hollows of Missouri's Ozark Hills during the winter of 1874, when the mountain ridges lay shrouded in mists that seemed to carry the whispered lamentations of the damned. Captain Isaiah Morse of the Union Army received orders that would challenge everything he believed about the nature of evil and the boundaries between the natural and supernatural worlds. The telegram that arrived at Fort Davidson on February 8, 1874, was brief but carried implications that would haunt the captain for the remainder of his military service. Entire settlement of Millerville evacuated. 47 residents missing. Evidence suggests mass slaughter. Investigate immediately. Authorized to use whatever force necessary. Millerville had been established in 1871 as a lumber camp that evolved into a small but thriving community of settlers drawn to the rich timber, resources and mineral deposits that made the remote Ozark location profitable despite its isolation from major transportation routes. The settlement housed families of loggers, miners, and trappers who had learned to thrive in the harsh mountain environment, creating a self-sufficient community that rarely required outside assistance and maintained minimal contact with federal authorities. When Captain Morse arrived at Millerville, with a detachment of 12 soldiers, he found a ghost town that defied rational explanation. The settlement's buildings remained intact, showing no signs of military assault, natural disaster, or conventional criminal activity, yet every human inhabitant had vanished without trace. Doors stood open to winter winds, meals sat half-eaten on tables where they had frozen solid, and children's toys lay scattered in yards where no footprints marked the snow that had fallen since the disappearances occurred. But it was the blood that transformed mystery into horror. Every building in Millerville contained evidence of violence so extensive that walls, floors, and ceilings were stained with dried blood in quantities that suggested the systematic slaughter of every resident. Yet no bodies were found anywhere in the settlement, creating a puzzle that challenged the captain's understanding of human behavior and criminal methodology. The blood patterns showed characteristics that military experience had taught Morse to recognize: arterial sprays that indicated throat cutting, pools that suggested victims had been left to bleed out slowly, and drag marks that traced the removal of corpses from their death sites. But the sheer volume of blood found throughout the settlement indicated that the killings had been conducted with ritualistic precision, rather than the efficiency typical of raiders seeking to eliminate resistance and secure valuables. More disturbing were the symbols carved into wooden surfaces throughout the settlement. Complex, geometric patterns combined with representations of animals and human figures that suggested religious or magical significance, rather than random vandalism. The carvings appeared to have been made with sharp tools wielded by steady hands, indicating deliberate artistic expression rather than the hasty marking typical of military occupations or bandit raids. Private Thomas Sherman, the detachment's most experienced tracker, reported that the trails leading away from Millerville showed evidence that the missing residents had been taken alive and transported deeper into the Ozark wilderness. The tracks indicated a large group moving on foot through terrain that would have been impossible for normal humans to navigate while carrying supplies and captives, suggesting either supernatural assistance or the involvement of individuals with extraordinary knowledge of mountain survival techniques. As the investigation continued, Captain Morse began hearing stories from neighboring settlements about the existence of a clan that lived in the deepest reaches of the Ozark Mountains, so isolated and inbred that they had evolved beyond normal human limitations and developed capabilities that bordered on the supernatural. These stories, dismissed by most military authorities as frontier superstition, took on new significance when viewed as potential explanations for the Millerville disappearances. The origins of what locals called the Blood Witch clan traced back to the Civil War period. when a Confederate sympathizer named Victoria Munsford had established a reputation as a necromancer, capable of commanding supernatural forces for military purposes. Known by the battlefield nickname Malectus, Victoria had allegedly used dark magic to animate the corpses of fallen soldiers, creating armies of the undead that fought without regard for conventional weapons or military tactics. Historical records from the period were fragmentary and often contradictory, but eyewitness accounts from both Union and Confederate sources described encounters with reanimated corpses that showed no response to wounds that should have been instantly fatal. These undead warriors demonstrated coordination and tactical awareness that exceeded what should have been possible for simple animated corpses, suggesting that Victoria's necromancy involved sophisticated magic rather than crude reanimation techniques. When the Confederacy collapsed in 1865, Victoria had fled into the Ozark wilderness with followers who shared her commitment to supernatural practices and her rejection of conventional human society. The group established a settlement in a remote valley where they could practice their dark arts without interference from authorities or neighboring communities that might object to their activities, but isolation and inbreeding had consequences that Victoria's supernatural knowledge could not prevent or control. The children born to her followers inherited not only their parents' magical abilities, but also physical and mental deformities that intensified with each generation. By 1874, the clan that descended from Victoria's original group had evolved into something that could barely be classified as human, with capabilities and appetites that reflected their supernatural heritage more than their biological ancestry. The current matriarch of the clan, known only as Mother Blackthorne, was rumored to be Victoria's great-granddaughter and the most powerful necromancer the Bloodline had produced. Unlike her ancestor, who had used magic for military and political purposes, Mother Blackthorne had focused her abilities on survival and expansion, developing techniques that allowed the clan to sustain itself by consuming the life force of human victims rather than relying on conventional food sources. This supernatural cannibalism had advantages that made the clan nearly impossible to eliminate through conventional means. Members who fed regularly on human life essence aged more slowly than normal humans, developed enhanced physical capabilities that included superhuman strength and speed, and gained access to the memories and knowledge of their victims, making them increasingly intelligent and cunning with each feeding cycle. As Captain Morse compiled his preliminary report on the Millerville incident, he began to understand that his investigation had uncovered evidence of predation by creatures that combined human intelligence with capabilities that exceeded any natural animal. The Blood Witch clan represented a form of evolved humanity that had transcended normal biological limitations through supernatural means, creating beings that posed unprecedented threats to conventional human settlements. The captain's growing awareness of the true nature of his adversary was confirmed when his detachment discovered the first physical evidence of clan members' presence in the area. Tracks found near Millerville showed characteristics that suggested human forms, but with proportions and capabilities that exceeded normal human anatomy. Longer strides than should have been possible for bipedal locomotion, claw marks that indicated retractable talons, and most disturbing, bite impressions in wooden surfaces that suggested teeth designed for maximum tissue damage rather than normal human dental configurations. The investigation of Millerville had revealed not simply a case of mass murder by human perpetrators, but evidence of systematic predation by beings who had evolved beyond humanity while retaining enough human characteristics to plan and execute complex operations against civilized communities. The Blood Witch clan represented evolution guided by supernatural forces rather than natural selection, creating apex predators specifically designed to prey upon normal human populations. Deep within the shadow-haunted recesses of Blackthorne Hollow, where ancient limestone caves provided natural cathedral spaces for ceremonies that predated Christian civilization by millennia. The Blood Witch clan had transformed simple survival into an art form that combined supernatural predation with ritualistic consumption, designed to maximize the life force extracted from each victim. The hollow itself seemed designed by malevolent forces specifically for their purposes, a natural amphitheater surrounded by towering rock walls that amplified sound while preventing escape, with underground chambers that provided perfect conditions for storing living victims until they could be processed according to the clan's elaborate feeding protocols. Mother Blackthorne, the ancient matriarch whose appearance defied easy estimation of her chronological age, presided over feeding rituals that had evolved through generations of experimentation and refinement into ceremonies that extracted not only physical nourishment, but also the memories, skills, and spiritual essence of those consumed. Her own longevity and enhanced capabilities demonstrated the effectiveness of techniques that allowed clan members to absorb the accumulated life experience of their victims, creating beings whose knowledge and abilities far exceeded what any single human lifetime could. Provide the ritual chamber where the clan conducted their most important feeding ceremonies had been carved from solid rock by generations of clan members using tools that combined conventional implements with claws and teeth that had evolved specifically for working stone. The walls were covered with symbols that recorded the clan's history and the names of significant victims whose consumption had provided particularly valuable knowledge or abilities. These carved records served both as historical documentation and as focusing devices that channeled supernatural energies during feeding rituals. At the center of the chamber stood an altar hewn from black stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflecting it, creating an area of supernatural darkness even when surrounded by torches and fires. The altar's surface was carved with channels that guided the flow of blood into collection vessels positioned around its base, allowing the clan to harvest and preserve the life essence of victims for later consumption. By members who were not present during the actual killing, the feeding process itself was far more complex than simple cannibalism, involving stages that systematically extracted different aspects of the victim's life force, while maximizing the supernatural benefits derived from consumption. Initial preparation involved bleeding the victim slowly while maintaining consciousness, allowing fear and pain to concentrate the life essence and making it more potent for subsequent absorption. This preliminary phase could last for hours or even days, depending on the victim's physical condition and the clan's assessment of their potential value. Once the victim had been sufficiently prepared, the actual feeding ritual began with invocations in a language that combined elements of Cherokee spiritual practices with incantations that Victoria Munsford had learned during her study of necromantic arts. Mother Blackthorne led these chants while clan members arranged themselves around the altar according to hierarchies, based on their supernatural abilities and their relationship to the matriarchal bloodline that controlled clan activities. The consumption process was conducted according to strict protocols that determined which clan members had access to specific organs and body parts, with different tissues providing different types of supernatural nourishment. The heart and brain were reserved for Mother Blackthorne and her closest descendants, as these organs contained the concentrated life essence and memories that provided the greatest enhancement of magical abilities. Lesser clan members received portions of muscle tissue and blood that strengthened physical capabilities without providing access to the victim's knowledge or skills. But the most significant aspect of the feeding ritual was the supernatural transfer that occurred during consumption, allowing clan members to absorb not only physical nourishment, but also the memories, personality traits, and learned skills of their victims. This process created a form of immortality through accumulated consciousness, with older clan members possessing knowledge and abilities that spanned multiple human lifetimes and represented the combined experience of hundreds of consumed individuals. The psychological effects of this supernatural cannibalism were as significant as the physical enhancements it provided. Clan members who had fed extensively on human victims began exhibiting personality characteristics and knowledge that belonged to their prey, creating hybrid consciousness that combined their original identity with fragments of consumed souls. These merged personalities were more intelligent and capable than normal humans, but also increasingly alien in their thought processes and motivations. The feeding rituals also served reproductive purposes within clan society, as consumption of human life essence enhanced fertility and influenced the characteristics of offspring born to clan members. Children conceived and gestated during periods of intensive feeding were born with enhanced supernatural abilities and physical modifications that exceeded those of their parents, creating evolutionary pressure that drove the clan toward increasingly inhuman characteristics. Mother Blackthorne herself exemplified the results of generations of supernatural consumption, possessing capabilities that bordered on godlike within the limited sphere of her mountain domain. Her ability to command the spirits of previously consumed victims allowed her to access knowledge and skills that spanned centuries of human experience, while her enhanced magical abilities permitted her to manipulate natural forces in ways that defied scientific explanation. The clan's feeding practices had also influenced their social structure and reproductive strategies, creating a society organized around the systematic harvest of human life force rather than conventional economic activities. Members were assigned roles based on their abilities to locate, capture, and process victims, with status determined by contribution to the clan's supernatural nutrition rather than traditional measures of wealth or achievement. Young clan members were trained from birth in the techniques necessary for successful predation on human settlements, learning to move silently through terrain that would challenge experienced hunters, to coordinate attacks using supernatural senses that allowed communication across distances, and most importantly, to evaluate potential victims for their suitability as sources of specific types of life essence. The clan had also developed methods for preserving extracted life force in forms that could be stored and consumed during periods when fresh victims were unavailable. These preserved essences maintained their supernatural potency for extended periods, allowing the clan to sustain their enhanced abilities even during harsh winter months when hunting human prey became difficult or dangerous. The feeding ritual served not only nutritional purposes but also spiritual functions within clan society, reinforcing the supernatural bonds that connected members and maintaining the magical energies that sustained their enhanced abilities. The shared consumption of human life force created telepathic connections between clan members that allowed coordination of activities across the extensive territory they controlled, making them far more dangerous than their numbers alone would suggest. As the clan's reputation for supernatural predation spread throughout the Ozark region, their feeding rituals became increasingly elaborate and ambitious, targeting not just isolated individuals, but entire communities whose systematic consumption could provide massive infusions of life force for the clan's continued evolution. The Millerville Massacre represented the culmination of this escalating appetite, demonstrating that the Blood Witch clan had developed the capabilities and organization necessary to eliminate entire settlements for supernatural nourishment. The success of such large-scale feeding operations encouraged Mother Blackthorne to plan even more ambitious attacks against human settlements, with the ultimate goal of establishing the clan as the dominant predatory species throughout the Ozark region. The supernatural advantages gained through ritual consumption had made the clan nearly invulnerable to conventional human resistance, creating conditions that favored their expansion at the expense of normal human populations. In the sterile confines of Fort Davidson's medical dispensary, where the harsh realities of frontier military service were typically addressed through conventional medicine and surgery, Dr. Elias Blackwood found himself confronting evidence that challenged his scientific training and forced him to consider possibilities that existed far beyond the boundaries of rational medical practice. The patient who had been brought to his attention was Sarah Whitlock, a 28-year-old schoolteacher who claimed to be the sole survivor of the Millerville massacre and whose physical condition suggested experiences that defied explanation through any known medical or psychological framework. Sarah had been discovered 3 days after Captain Morse's initial investigation of the abandoned settlement, found wandering in a state of near catatonic shock along a mountain trail 15 miles from Millerville. Her rescuers, a patrol of cavalry soldiers conducting a routine reconnaissance mission, initially assumed she was suffering from exposure and trauma related to witnessing the violent deaths of her community members. But her account of events, when she finally became coherent enough to provide testimony, revealed details about the Blood Witch clan that transformed the military's understanding of the threat they were facing. Captain Morse's interrogation of Sarah took place in the fort's conference room, with Dr. Blackwood present to monitor her physical condition and assess the reliability of testimony that seemed to describe events beyond the realm of normal human experience. Sarah's appearance showed evidence of severe trauma that went beyond simple exposure to winter conditions. Her hair had turned completely white despite her young age. Her eyes showed signs of damage consistent with exposure to supernatural phenomena. And most disturbing, her body bore bite marks that appeared to be healing with characteristics that suggested non-human origin. The schoolteacher's account began with her description of the evening when the Blood Witch clan attacked Millerville during what should have been a peaceful community gathering to celebrate the successful completion of the winter timber harvest. According to Sarah, the attack had been preceded by supernatural phenomena that the residents initially dismissed as natural weather patterns or animal behavior, but which actually served as advance warning of the approaching predators. We noticed the birds stopped singing 3 days before it happened. Sarah testified in a voice that remained steady despite the obvious emotional trauma she had endured. All the dogs in town started howling at sunset and wouldn't stop until dawn, and livestock refused to leave their shelters even when we tried to force them out for feeding. Old Mrs. Henderson said she could smell something rotting in the wind, but we couldn't find any source for the odor, no matter how thoroughly we searched. Sarah's description of the actual attack revealed tactical coordination that exceeded anything Captain Morse had encountered during his military service, combined with supernatural abilities that allowed the clan members to overcome the settlement's defenses with devastating efficiency. The assault had begun at midnight, when most residents were gathered in the community hall for an evening of music and socializing that made them vulnerable to coordinated attack. They came from all directions at once. Sarah continued, her hands trembling as she recalled details that obviously caused her severe psychological distress. But they moved wrong, too fast, too quiet, and they could see perfectly in the dark while we were blind. Their eyes glowed red like coals, and when they opened their mouths to make sounds, I could see they had teeth like wild animals rather than normal human teeth. The tactical aspects of the clan's assault demonstrated planning and intelligence that indicated extensive prior surveillance of the settlement and careful analysis of the residents' routines and defensive capabilities. The attackers had positioned themselves to block all escape routes before beginning their assault, used the community gathering as an opportunity to target the maximum number of victims simultaneously, and employed supernatural abilities that neutralized conventional weapons and defensive measures. Dr. Blackwood's medical examination of Sarah revealed physical evidence that corroborated her testimony about the supernatural nature of her attackers. The bite marks on her arms and shoulders showed characteristics that were inconsistent with wounds inflicted by normal human teeth. The puncture patterns suggested longer and sharper canines than any human possessed, while the spacing indicated jaw structures that were proportionally different from normal human anatomy. More significantly, the bite wounds were healing with unusual characteristics that suggested exposure to substances or energies that promoted tissue regeneration beyond normal biological processes. The edges of the wounds were closing without scarring. New tissue was growing at rates that exceeded normal healing timeframes. And most puzzling, the healed areas showed enhanced sensitivity and resilience that suggested permanent modification of Sarah's physical capabilities. Blood analysis conducted by Dr. Blackwood revealed the presence of unknown substances in Sarah's circulatory system, compounds that did not match any known medications, toxins, or biological materials, but which appeared to be enhancing her immune system and accelerating her recovery from trauma. These substances suggested that her exposure to clan members had resulted in some form of contamination or infection that was producing beneficial rather than harmful effects on her physiology. Sarah's description of the clan members themselves provided military intelligence that would prove crucial for planning defensive strategies against future attacks. According to her testimony, the attackers displayed obvious signs of inbreeding and genetic modification that had produced characteristics significantly different from normal human anatomy and behavior patterns. Some of them looked almost normal, except for their eyes and teeth, Sarah reported during a subsequent interview session. But others were so changed that you could barely tell they had been human originally. Their arms and legs were too long for their bodies. Their fingers ended in claws that could tear through wood and metal. And they moved like predatory animals even when they were walking upright like people. The key, most disturbing aspect of Sarah's testimony concerned her observations of the clan's feeding behavior during and after the massacre. Rather than simply killing their victims and consuming the bodies, the clan members had conducted ritualistic feeding that appeared designed to extract something beyond physical nourishment from those they consumed. They didn't just eat people, Sarah testified, her voice dropping to a whisper as she recalled the most traumatic aspects of her experience. They drained them while they were still alive, drinking blood from wounds they made with their teeth and claws. But it wasn't just blood they were after. They seemed to be drawing something else out of their victims, something that made the clan members stronger and more alert after they fed. Dr. Blackwood's analysis of Sarah's testimony suggested that the clan's feeding practices involved the extraction of life force or spiritual essence rather than simple cannibalism, a conclusion that challenged medical science's understanding of human physiology, but which provided explanations for the supernatural capabilities that multiple witnesses had reported. If the clan could indeed absorb and utilize the life energy of their victims, it would explain their enhanced physical abilities, extended lifespans, and apparent immunity to conventional weapons and injuries. Sarah's survival of the massacre appeared to have been intentional rather than accidental, based on her description of being marked by clan members rather than immediately consumed like the other residents. The bite marks on her body had been inflicted with precision that suggested deliberate infection or contamination rather than random feeding behavior, indicating that the clan had specific plans for her future role in their activities. They kept talking about me in words I couldn't understand, Sarah explained during her final interview session. But I could tell from the way they looked at me and touched the bite marks they had made that I was being prepared for something rather than just being saved for later consumption. One of them, an old woman who seemed to be in charge, kept examining me like a physician would, checking my teeth and eyes and making notes on pieces of bark with charcoal. The implications of Sarah's survival and the apparent modifications to her physiology raised disturbing questions about the clan's long-term objectives. and their methods for expanding their population beyond simple reproduction within their existing bloodline. If they possessed techniques for converting normal humans into clan members through controlled infection or magical transformation, the threat they represented to frontier settlements was far greater than military. Authorities had initially assessed Captain Morse's strategic analysis based on Zera's testimony concluded that the Blood Witch clan represented an existential threat to human expansion into the Ozark region and possibly beyond, requiring immediate military intervention before their capabilities and numbers increased to the point where conventional forces would be unable to contain or eliminate them. The captain's recommendations called for the deployment of a full regiment supported by specialist personnel trained in unconventional warfare techniques. In March 1874, the largest military expedition ever deployed against a non-human enemy in American history assembled at Fort Davidson under the command of Captain Isaiah Morse, who had been granted unprecedented authority to requisition whatever personnel and equipment he deemed necessary to eliminate the supernatural threat posed by the Blood Witch clan. The expedition comprised 200 soldiers drawn from frontier units experienced in unconventional warfare, supported by Cherokee scouts whose ancestral knowledge of Ozark mountain terrain and supernatural phenomena provided tactical advantages that conventional military training could not supply. The expedition's preparation phase revealed the inadequacy of standard military protocols when applied to enemies whose capabilities exceeded normal human limitations and whose behavior patterns followed supernatural rather than rational logic. Captain Morse found himself developing entirely new tactical doctrines based on intelligence gathered from Sarah Whitlock's testimony and reports from other survivors of clan attacks who had managed to escape with their lives but not their sanity intact. The weapons and equipment selected for the expedition reflected the captain's growing understanding that conventional firearms and military hardware would provide limited effectiveness against enemies who possessed supernatural resilience and regenerative capabilities. In addition to standard military arms, the expedition was equipped with weapons blessed by military chaplains, silver ammunition that folklore suggested might prove effective against supernatural entities, and incendiary devices designed to ensure complete destruction of clan members who might survive wounds that would kill normal humans. Lieutenant Colonel James Patterson, the expedition's second-in-command, had initially expressed skepticism about the supernatural aspects of their mission until his own reconnaissance patrols began, encountering evidence that confirmed the most disturbing elements of Sarah Whitlock's testimony. Tracks found throughout the Ozark wilderness showed anatomical characteristics that exceeded normal human proportions. Territorial markings indicated intelligence and organization far superior to any known animal species. And most convincing, several patrol members reported encounters with beings whose appearance and behavior matched descriptions provided by massacre survivors. The expedition's Cherokee scouts, led by a veteran tracker named Joseph Ridge, whose grandfather had fought alongside Andrew Jackson against hostile tribes, provided cultural context that helped military officers understand the supernatural threat they were facing. According to Cherokee tradition, the Ozark region had always been considered spiritually dangerous, with certain areas avoided by hunting parties because of associations with malevolent spirits and cursed bloodlines that predated European settlement by centuries. "Your enemy is not human anymore," Ridge explained to Captain Morse during the final planning session before the expedition departed Fort Davidson. The Cherokee have stories about people who made pacts with dark spirits, trading their humanity for power over death and the ability to consume the life force of others. These stories always end the same way. The cursed ones become so hungry for human essence that they can never return to normal life, and they create offspring who are even more monstrous than themselves. The expedition's first major engagement with clan forces occurred on March 18, 1874, when a patrol led by Sergeant William Hayes encountered 3 clan members while reconnoitering approaches to the Blackthorne Hollow region. The brief but violent confrontation provided the military with crucial intelligence about clan capabilities while demonstrating the inadequacy of conventional combat tactics against supernatural enemies. The clan members attacked without warning from concealed positions that should not have been accessible to beings limited by normal human anatomy, dropping from tree canopies 30 feet above the ground with the silent precision of predatory cats while wielding crude but effective weapons that maximize their natural advantages. Their claws could penetrate military-issue equipment and inflict wounds that bled profusely despite their relatively small size. Their enhanced strength allowed them to overpower soldiers who should have been able to defeat them through superior training and conditioning, and most dangerous. Their ability to coordinate attacks through supernatural communication made them far more tactically effective than their numbers suggested. Sergeant Hayes's detailed after-action report described enemies who fought with intelligence and organization that indicated military-level planning, but employed methods that no human adversary would have been capable of executing. They demonstrated supernatural senses that allowed them to detect hidden soldiers from considerable distances, move through terrain that normal humans could not navigate while carrying equipment, and most disturbing, showed apparent immunity to wounds that should have been immediately incapacitating. The first soldier killed in the engagement, Private Robert Chen, died from wounds that military surgeons had never encountered in decades of frontier service. The fatal injuries consisted of parallel cuts that penetrated through uniform, equipment, and tissue to reach vital organs with surgical precision, combined with bite marks that suggested teeth designed for maximum tissue damage and blood loss. The pattern of wounds indicated predatory feeding behavior rather than simple combat effectiveness, confirming Sarah Whitlock's testimony about the clan's supernatural appetite for human life essence. 2 additional soldiers were severely wounded during the engagement, requiring immediate evacuation to Fort Davidson for medical treatment that pushed military medicine beyond its conventional capabilities. Private Marcus Webb, a veteran of multiple frontier campaigns, had been bitten during hand-to-hand combat with a clan member and began exhibiting symptoms that defied medical explanation: enhanced healing that closed wounds within hours, increased physical strength and sensory awareness, and most alarming, psychological changes that suggested fundamental alterations to his basic human nature. Dr. Blackwood's examination of Private Webb revealed that the bite wound was healing with characteristics similar to those observed in Sarah Whitlock, accompanied by the presence of unknown substances in his bloodstream that appeared to be modifying his physiology at the cellular level. The private reported enhanced night vision, improved hearing that allowed him to detect sounds inaudible to other soldiers, and increased physical capabilities that exceeded his previous fitness levels by significant margins. But the most disturbing aspect of Webb's condition was the psychological transformation that accompanied his physical enhancement. His personality began shifting toward patterns that resembled descriptions of clan behavior provided by survivors: increased aggression, apparent loss of empathy for human suffering, and most significantly, the development of appetites that suggested supernatural hunger for human blood and tissue. Captain Morse's tactical analysis of the first engagement led to significant modifications in expedition doctrine and procedures, emphasizing rapid movement, concentrated firepower, and immediate cremation of any clan members killed during combat to prevent potential resurrection or reanimation. The captain also implemented strict protocols for treating soldiers who had been wounded by clan members, including immediate isolation and continuous medical observation to detect signs of supernatural infection or transformation. The expedition's second major encounter with clan forces occurred on March 25th, when a company-strength patrol discovered evidence of a large clan settlement in a limestone cave complex that provided natural fortification against conventional military assault. The discovery of Blackthorne Hollow revealed the true scope of the supernatural threat facing frontier settlements and confirmed that the clan possessed organizational capabilities and strategic planning that exceeded anything military intelligence had anticipated. The cave complex showed evidence of occupation by at least 50 clan members, with facilities for food storage, weapon manufacture, and most disturbing, the systematic processing of human victims whose remains were found throughout the underground chambers. The clan's use of the cave system demonstrated sophisticated understanding of defensive positioning and logistics, with multiple escape routes, concealed observation positions, and storage areas that could sustain extended siege conditions. But the most shocking discovery within the cave complex was evidence that the clan had developed techniques for reanimating the corpses of their victims, creating undead servants who retained enough intelligence to perform complex tasks while being completely obedient to clan commands. These zombie-like beings served as manual labor for excavation and construction projects, guards for the clan's territory, and most tactical significant, expendable troops who could engage military forces without risking the lives of valuable clan members. The engagement at Blackthorne Hollow escalated into the largest supernatural battle in American military history, with 200 soldiers fighting against enemies whose capabilities included not only enhanced physical abilities, but also command over reanimated corpses that felt no pain, required no rest, and could continue fighting despite wounds that would instantly kill normal combatants. The battle demonstrated that conventional military tactics were inadequate against supernatural enemies who possessed advantages that traditional warfare had never been designed to counter. The dawn of the 21st century brought new technologies and investigative methods to the mystery of the Blood Witch clan, but it also revealed that the supernatural threat Captain Morse's expedition had fought to eliminate in 834 had not been destroyed, merely driven deeper underground and forced to adapt their predatory practices to changing circumstances. Modern forensic science, genetic analysis, and digital communication networks that should have made concealment impossible for any organized criminal group proved inadequate against enemies who had spent over a century perfecting techniques for remaining hidden while continuing to feed on human life. First, Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a forensic anthropologist specializing in unsolved disappearances and unidentified remains, first encountered evidence of continued clan activity in 2003, when she was called to examine skeletal remains found in remote areas of the Missouri Ozarks by hikers and hunters. The bones showed characteristics that defied conventional forensic classification, evidence of systematic butchering using tools and techniques that combined primitive methods with anatomical knowledge that exceeded what any known criminal organization possessed. DNA analysis of the remains revealed genetic markers that did not match any known human population group, suggesting that the victims had been consumed by predators whose own genetic structure had been modified beyond normal human parameters. The bone damage patterns indicated feeding behavior that extracted maximum nutritional value from human tissue while following ritualistic protocols that served purposes beyond simple consumption. More disturbing than the physical evidence was the discovery that disappearances matching the clan's historical predation patterns were continuing throughout the Ozark region at rates that suggested an organized and growing population of supernatural predators. Missing persons reports dating back to 1874 showed consistent characteristics: victims who vanished without trace from isolated locations, families who disappeared entirely from remote homesteads, and individuals whose personal effects were found but whose bodies were never recovered. The modern incarnation of the Blood Witch clan had learned to exploit contemporary society's mobility and anonymity to continue their feeding practices without attracting the systematic investigation that had nearly eliminated them in 1874. They targeted transients, runaways, undocumented immigrants, and other individuals whose disappearances were unlikely to trigger extensive law enforcement response, while avoiding the wholesale slaughter of established communities that had previously brought military intervention. Genetic analysis conducted by Dr. Walsh's team revealed that several prominent families in the modern Ozark region carried DNA markers consistent with clan ancestry, suggesting that surviving members had integrated themselves into normal human society while maintaining their supernatural characteristics and feeding requirements. These modern clan descendants had learned to satisfy their inherited hunger for human life force through discreet predation that mimicked conventional criminal activity rather than obvious supernatural assault. The integration strategy had proven remarkably successful, allowing clan members to establish themselves in positions of authority and influence within rural communities where their enhanced physical capabilities and accumulated knowledge gave them significant advantages over normal humans. They became successful business owners, law enforcement officials, medical professionals, and political leaders whose supernatural heritage remained hidden behind facades of conventional respectability. Investigation of their feeding practices revealed that modern clan members had developed sophisticated methods for harvesting human life essence without killing their victims immediately, allowing them to maintain sustainable sources of supernatural nourishment while avoiding the attention that mass disappearances would inevitably attract. They operated blood banks, organ donation centers, and medical facilities that provided cover for systematic life force extraction disguised as legitimate medical procedures. The clan's reproductive strategies had also evolved to maximize their survival and expansion in contemporary conditions. Rather than relying solely on inbreeding within their isolated mountain communities, they had begun systematically intermarrying with normal humans to create hybrid offspring who inherited supernatural abilities while appearing sufficiently human to integrate into mainstream society. These hybrid descendants served as recruitment agents who could identify suitable candidates for transformation into full clan members through carefully controlled exposure to clan blood and tissue during medical procedures, workplace accidents, or staged criminal attacks that introduced supernatural contamination while providing plausible explanations for any resulting behavioral or physical changes. The transformation process had been refined through over a century of experimentation and practice, allowing the clan to convert selected humans into supernatural beings who retained their original personalities and memories while gaining enhanced capabilities and the inherited hunger for human life force that characterized clan members. This controlled expansion strategy enabled geometric growth in clan numbers while maintaining the secrecy essential for their continued survival. Modern communication technologies had also been adapted to serve clan purposes, with encrypted networks, allowing coordination between widely scattered clan cells throughout the American South and Midwest. These communication systems enabled the sharing of intelligence about potential victims, law enforcement activities, and opportunities for expansion while maintaining operational security that prevented detection by conventional surveillance methods. The clan's ultimate objective appeared to be the gradual replacement of normal human populations throughout their traditional territory, followed by expansion into urban areas where their enhanced capabilities and accumulated resources could be used to establish dominance over conventional human society. Their patient, methodical approach to this goal reflected centuries of accumulated wisdom about the importance of avoiding detection while systematically weakening their prey species. Dr. Walsh's investigation revealed that the transformation of human society was already well advanced in certain rural areas where clan influence had grown strong enough to control local institutions and eliminate potential opposition. These regions showed demographic patterns that suggested systematic population replacement, with native families disappearing or relocating while new residents with clan characteristics moved in to fill vacant properties and assume abandoned businesses. The medical implications of clan evolution were perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Dr. Walsh's findings. Analysis of tissue samples from suspected clan members revealed that their cellular structure had been modified to process human life. Force as a primary energy source, making them dependent on supernatural feeding for survival while providing capabilities that exceeded any known biological system. These modifications appeared to be heritable through both genetic transmission and supernatural infection, creating multiple pathways for clan expansion that were difficult to detect or prevent using conventional medical or law enforcement methods. The clan had essentially become a parasitic species that required human life force for survival, while possessing the intelligence and capabilities necessary to farm their prey species efficiently. The long-term implications of clan expansion suggested that humanity faced an existential threat from predators who combined supernatural capabilities with human intelligence and organization. Unlike previous supernatural threats that had been limited by their alien nature or primitive capabilities, the Blood Witch clan represented evolution specifically designed to exploit human weaknesses while maximizing predatory efficiency. Contemporary clan members possessed all the accumulated knowledge and experience of their consumed victims, giving them comprehensive understanding of human psychology, technology, and social organization that they could use to manipulate their prey species with devastating effectiveness. They had become the ultimate apex predators, capable of sustaining themselves indefinitely by feeding on human civilization while appearing to be productive members of the society they were systematically consuming. Dr. Walsh's final report concluded that the Blood Witch clan had successfully adapted to modern conditions and was actively working to expand their influence throughout human society with the ultimate goal of establishing themselves as the dominant species on Earth. The supernatural advantages gained through centuries of ritual consumption had made them nearly invulnerable to conventional countermeasures, while their patient, methodical approach to expansion ensured that their activities would remain hidden until their dominance became irreversible. The eternal feast that had begun in the isolated hollows of the Missouri Ozarks was continuing in the 21st century, hidden behind the facades of modern civilization, but guided by the same insatiable hunger that had driven the clan's ancestors to consume entire frontier settlements. Humanity's survival depended on recognizing the threat and developing countermeasures before the Blood Witch clan achieved their vision of a world where normal humans existed only as livestock for their supernatural masters' eternal sustenance.